Hello and welcome back to Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, 𝐩𝐞𝐫𝐢𝐯. I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on 𝐬𝐭𝐫 TV's channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the 𝐬𝐭 TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. 𝐬𝐭 TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 216 and forward. Today I have a very special guest. Her and I connected a few months ago we were both keynote speakers at this event, and it was just beautiful to meet this woman. We just fully aligned. It was just, I don't know. I felt like I knew her forever after she got off stage and we just started talking. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Bayo. It's so great to have you on our show today. So today,
thank you for having me. I am excited to be here. This is just wonderful.
So I just want to dive in because I think the topic that we talked about that we're going to do is how do we get out of perfection and really just be okay with making progress and doing the best that we can.
So, when we think about all of those things and how the amount of pressure that we put on ourselves every day and the guilt and all of these extra things that I call imaginary rumination that happens, and it really prevents us from just flourishing in whatever we're doing in each day. And so for me, it's taking it minute by minute, hour by hour, and just going with the flow. And there are multiple landmines that I, encounter every day as I'm going through being a mom, a physician, medical director, and all the other things that I just really love to do. And so just taking micro steps, I think has allowed me to have grace for myself and each situation that I might encounter.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head exactly, because I think even with kids, they're doing that now. I'm seeing more and more kids with anxiety and depression, and when we look at the cause of this, it's the need to be perfect. It's the need to have it done right. It's the need to have the best grades, to have your parents see you and be proud of you. And if it's not happening, then they want to isolate. If they're not enough for their parents, they want to isolate. And there's this theme of perfection, like there has to be a perfect. And it's interesting because I learned years ago that there's no such thing as perfect, because you have your perception of what perfect is. I have my perception of perfect. So which one's right? Who's perfect is right in that moment, right? So it's really helping parents. How do we see our kids to help them understand that there's not a perfect way? There's just, like you said, really just doing your best. So I'm curious, because you said that, you do a lot of different hats with facilities that you work at, being a physician, being a mom. So how do you juggle all that and teach your kids at the same time that there's no perfect way to do it?
So the definition of perfect doesn't exist in our household. And when some, every once in a while, someone will say, "Oh, I didn't get it perfect." One of my kiddos will say that. And I shower a reminder of perfection is whatever we think is what perfection is supposed to be. We have agency. And I tell my kiddos, you have the ability, I use that word, to decide where you land. It doesn't have to be in this world of perfection of whatever you have created. And I think that's a part that we forget. When we talk about perception, it is our own perception. It's what we create in that space. And so what I'm doing is, as I juggle like doctor's appointments for my kiddos, school, lunches, all of these things, I am writing down what I hope to achieve in that day, what my anticipation is for that day. And then I write what are the things that I really want to get done. And I know that sounds tedious, but having those 3 columns is really helpful because then it's a reminder that this is what I was anticipating, this is what I really was expecting, and this is what I really needed to get done. And so when you kind of put those together, it helps you kind of have a different perception of what was going to actually happen and the reality check about it. And so I do that with my girls too. And it's a really fruitful exercise for myself personally and for my kiddos.
Right. And I think that, I mean, again, I think it's so important that we are exhibiting the fact that it's about doing your best. Like there is no perfect way to do it. And I also feel no matter what we do to influence our kids, there's a bigger influence sometimes outside the home when they're at school 8 hours a day and they're surrounded by their friends and they want to get it right. So, do you feel there's a difference between getting it right and getting it perfect?
So you had mentioned getting it right and getting it perfect. I think that's what I heard. And let me know if I misheard. Again, I think for me, I like to unpack that piece and share that it's about whatever you're able to do to your best of your ability in that moment. And the reason why I like to break that down is in that moment, there are so many different things that could be going on that could end up um, pivoting the way that you were hoping to get something achieved and done. And so I do think there's a distinction between the two, and being okay with just getting it done or getting it right. But either way, it's about how you were able to really fulfill that goal and get it done.
Yes. And I think that kids misinterpret that, right? Because they are they understand at school to get a good grade, they have to get it right. They think 100 is I got to get 100 because that's perfect. And in all reality, 100 means is that you got everything correct. They're again taking away the perfect, right? You got it right. You got 100% of the questions right. That doesn't make it perfect, doesn't make it imperfect. It just makes it that you got them right. Because I'm noticing that a lot. When we talk about the subject, I'm noticing it a lot with especially the teenage clients that I work with, is that they're always striving for perfection. And as their coach, I help them to identify just that same question, what's the difference of right versus perfection? And in their mind and their perception, it's when I get it right, it is perfect. They're very synonymous.
And for me, one thing that we really kind of focus on in our household is the fact that I want you to be challenged.
Yes.
I don't want you to get everything right. And so for my girls, I share with them, okay, so you received a great grade, but I want to see where you struggled and you didn't receive a good grade because that's how I know that you were challenged. And so one thing we do is we really celebrate those moments that are not of high achieving or considered the successes. We really celebrate those moments where you struggled, where you didn't do per se what perception states is well done. That is what we celebrate in our household. Those are the wins. And so if you struggled or you had issues and you became frustrated, that is a win in our household because when you become frustrated, that's how those synapses, that's how you grow in your personal, professional, anything that's happening. And in our household, for my little ones, that's how they're going to grow. And that's what I hope for, what will carry them forward as they get bigger and as they, are facing other issues or challenges in life.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I've adopted through working with another company, um, one of our slogans is Dare to Suck. And I love that. And I teach that to my kids, Dare to Suck, because it takes off the pressure of having to be perfect. It's, and I was just, it's so funny that we're talking about this because I literally was just talking about this today twice to different clients about, you know, if you win a game and you bring home the trophy, you win it for the moment. It's an excitement, you celebrate. And yet when you lose the game, you get the forever lesson, you get the forever win, because there's things that you get to learn. It's not losing, it's learning. What opportunities did you learn that you can make it even better next time? And it's a lifelong lesson. So 6 years later, when you remember that game that you lost, you're not going to remember that you lost. You're going to remember the learnings that you got from it, and all that you got from that learning throughout the last 7 years that you're able to take with you. Because like you, I believe the same thing. I tell my kids, I said, there's not perfect. It's not, I don't care if my kid is failing and they've done all their work. My concern is, what are they not obtaining in their mind to understand the process to get a better grade? Because all grades is a scale of, are you understanding this information to move forward, or do you need some extra help because you're not obtaining it? And it's the difference of not putting emphasis that there's a perfect. It's, I care about if you're getting the education you need to keep moving forward in your life. And I'm going to tell you, it's not like that for everyone. Kids are getting in trouble if they have an F. And I'm not talking about an F where you didn't turn the work in, you're not making it. I'm not talking about that, because even I have boundaries at my house, right? Like, if you're putting more attention and intention on your friends and the computer and less on school, we're going to take that away until you could put that same intention on your schoolwork. And then we'll talk about social. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about these kids that literally do everything they can and they're still not doing great in school. And instead of punishing them, it's asking them better questions to help them. It's a progression. Like you said, it's not perfect. It's a progression. I think there's like a little delay in us.
And I love that you mentioned, really leaning into that curiosity, those questions. And I do see patients. I think that's an opportunity to learn, figure out those reasonings or learnings behind what has happened. And that becomes your playbook on how you move forward. And so when my kiddos have had issues, I'm leaning into, so tell me more why you think that happened, and really being intentional with how I ask, so there's not a layer of judgment. And that takes time. And by no means, and I know all of us listening here, none of us are perfect as we talk about those words. But I really try to invest in, how can I really unlayer or give my best self to my kiddos when I'm asking those questions, because that part, that delivery, is really important and will impact what you get back from your kiddos to create that playbook. And so I really like to just kind of make sure that I'm just saying, tell me more. And I do that in healthcare, and I do that with my kids. And sometimes I might get those answers, sometimes I don't. My kiddos, sometimes there's just crying, but trying each time to create consistency with the delivery of that question, I think creates this kind of conduit or bridge for us to build upon in respect to communication when they get older. That when mommy's asking, she's just curious to know what's going on. And I hope that, helps in the future.
Yes, I love that. And I'm very, I attempt to be very purpose driven as well. And so for me, I try to stay away from the why questions, like, why did you do that? Because it makes them feel defensive. Like, I don't know why I did that. And then we get this like answer right away. And it's not even the answer they wanted to give. They just wanted to get out of the defensiveness. They put them on the defensiveness. So asking them other questions, what would that look like if you did it this way? What if you would have spent more time on it? What do you think you could have, created if you didn't rush through it? Tell me. And I love that. Tell me more. I love that. Tell me more. I think also, where else, I was curious, where else do you see this whole perfection thing showing up with kids? Because I know that it's one of the things that creates a lot of anxiety. And I don't know if in your practice, if you see a lot of kids, if you see kids with anxiety, if you're familiar with that and what you're seeing, because what I'm seeing with anxiety, with the the clients that I get to serve, it really comes from, am I going to do enough? Am I going to be enough? Am I going to get it right? Is it going to be perfect? To the point where kids self-sabotage. They literally rather not turn the work in and fail because they didn't turn the work in than turning the work in and failing because their work wasn't perfect.
So, twofold. I see it in physical ailments where some of my and I see all ages, so and I love that part about my practice, I get to see everybody, I'll see kiddos that'll come in with specific ailments, and in my practice, it's always been important to me that I will check everything just to make sure that it isn't a physical ailment, that is actually happening, and so sometimes I'll see stomach pain, headaches, different things in that respect, and so I'll do what we call traditionally a workup and kind of making sure lab tests, physical exam, all of those things to make sure it's not correlated with something as far as a health condition or a disease or something of that sort. And when I've kind of ruled everything out and discovered possible social issues or things that are happening at school or at home, and sometimes we don't even identify, what is happening, that's when I've really heard about this kind of level of trying to achieve perfection in some sort of space. And it actually causes a physical condition to occur. And that we can't forget, and I always say this to my patients, that there's no rule that you can't have more than one thing going on at the same time. And I think we have to look at that because sometimes you could have a thyroid issue, you could have something else that could be causing anxiety, mental health issues, and so forth, but you could also have anxiety too. And so that is something that I lean into every time I see my patients because not everybody falls into one category. We are made up of so many different things, which makes us beautiful in our own way. And I think when we realize that, and at least for me as a clinician, as a physician, it helps me see my patient for all the pieces forward and really help diagnose them with whatever is happening in that correct space. And so I'm seeing a blend of perfection with body image, mental health, all of those things on top of actual health conditions as well, a part of it.
Yeah. I always tell my clients comparison steals your joy.
Yes.
When you're comparing yourself to someone else, it's stealing your joy. It's stealing a part of who you are and the gifts that you have into this world. And we're all born differently. We all have different looks and different features. And some bodies are big, some are small, some are tall, some are brown, some are white. It's like we all are gifted with different attributes, if you would. And when our kids start to compare, for whatever reason, maybe it's the kid that gets along with everybody and they want to be like that, maybe it's the fastest runner, maybe it's the best tennis player, it doesn't matter. Immediately they start to compare themselves and they realize, like, if I was perfect, I would be like them. Our kids are actually putting the label of what perfect is, again, through their perception. And so I think another opportunity for our listeners that do run into this is really helping your children realize the gifts that they possess. Like, what are their own gifts that they have, to get away from the perfectionism, to get away from that's perfect and I'm not. It's really identifying in their own worth, their self-esteem, building them up to recognize the gifts that they possess within them that they can share with the world. Because the minute that you're able to see your own beauty, your own gifts, is the time that you stop comparing to anybody else.
I agree. And I think we have to remind ourselves as adults that we have to do that too. And, it's a beautiful thing. Like when I look at my girls and how sometimes they'll put an outfit on or they'll just celebrate little small moments. I have pockets in my jeans and just the pure happiness of those kinds of things. And what a joy it is to really think about all of the beautiful things that we carry on ourselves every day. And I'm not talking necessarily material, I'm just talking about our skin, our attributes, all of those things that really make us up and that we get to have with us always is a beautiful thing, and it should be celebrated more. And so that's something in our household we try to think about every day.
I love it. And, when we talk about doing our best, I think with kids, it's important, because I have 6 kids and it doesn't matter the oldest to the youngest. It's really identifying what is their own greatness because we all have greatness within us. And when they are able to really hone in on that greatness, they're able to do things that make them happy. They're able to see their happiness. They create their happiness. Like it's really helping kids understand that your happiness is not determined by someone else's behavior. You get to choose what happiness looks like to you. And if you don't like something about yourself, change it. What do you need to do to like about yourself? And it's asking them these questions. So we as parents can influence our kids more so than society. Because I'm going to tell you, nowadays, what people are seeing on TV, what people are talking about, it's not the same thing we're talking about in our household. Until my child comes back and decides to talk to us about it, we're like, where did you hear that? What are we talking about here? And why are we talking about this at 11 years old?
That is so true. The bubble, like I call it my bubble. My bubble continues to have little openings of the bubble I created from when they were a baby, and now new things have disrupted that bubble, and so what I experienced as a kiddo is so different based on what they are, and so I often think about this bubble that my parents, I'm sure, created as well, and so we have to kind of just lean into really continuing to love on our children in the way that they would like to be loved on. And I know that's a complicated and a weird way to say it, but when we think about what we just mentioned, asking, telling, loving all the things that are about you, that is really a way to provide love in all areas. And when they see that from you, it can be very helpful for them to start fostering it in themselves. And when I say that, not just saying it to them, but delivering it to yourself, because we are the role model, the things that they see more than anything else. Like they are seeing how we interact with other people, how we love on ourselves. And I think there's power in reminding ourselves of that as we're trying to advocate and help our kids, be the best version of themselves. I always go back to we still have to give ourselves the best version of ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it starts with teaching our kids, like some of the questions that I ask, it's all about questions in my house. It's what is the best you look like? What is the best you look like at your sport? What is the best look of you look like at math? And it's like my kids are at different levels and they both have different answers, and that is okay. And I was like, absolutely, because if they can recognize that they're doing the best they can, and I can teach them to celebrate they're doing the best they can, I feel like that sets a standard for them versus thinking the word perfect is the standard. You know, it's like I tell them all the time, there's no such thing as perfect. I mean, I grew up wanting to be perfect. And that's probably why I grew up not feeling great about myself because the need to be perfect, I ended up comparing because that was my strategy. How would you know you're perfect? Well, I'm perfect if I look like that. I'm perfect if I do that. I'm perfect if I'm just like them because that was my standard of perfect. And I failed every time because no matter what I tried to do, I was never going to be white. I wanted to be white because all these, to me, that was perfect to be white. And, when I grew up, and guess what? it wasn't until I got into my 30s that I realized that I was perfect the way I was with my brown skin. Like I never really appreciated it because I had this illusion of perfect was being white. And it was just where I was surrounded with. And so I want to teach my kids better because if I could teach them better, then they can do better. Because once I knew better, I did better as well. I'm sorry, I think there's like a little delay between us. So, so going back to, this whole topic about there's no perfect, it's being your best. What strategies would you give our listeners to also nurture our kids and even ourselves to be our best?
So and I heard one piece that you had mentioned. I want to go back to that. I love how you shared, loving your skin color, loving all of those pieces and being okay with that. I think that is something that we have to realize when we look at the new climate of our world, and whether it's wanting lighter skin, darker skin, curly hair, straight hair, which some of those parts were what we experience as well, but it's definitely at a bigger level because you can find a product that can change it in a minute, before you even think about thinking deeper. Why would I want to change that, or and so forth? And so I think that, going back to your answer, is first really taking inventory on what parts that you don't like, and then tying into where did that come from? And that's where I think of when you just mentioned being like, the color of my skin, I want it to be this and that. So thinking about where was the origin of that dislike or that unfavorable feeling about something. And I think when you can kind of find that root cause, that connection, it really helps you start to change. And so I would encourage everyone to think about that. And you can just start with one thing and go down that memory lane and think about, where did that come from? Do I still feel like that? And if I do, what would I like to do to change that? And that's what I do with my little ones. My youngest has curly hair, my oldest has straight hair, and my youngest really wants straight hair. And so I actually said, tell me more about your curly hair. Like what? And she just said, well, all the kids have straight hair. And I see everybody on TV, and different things, have straight hair. And so that was the origin for her. And I said, well, I see a lot of kiddos that have beautiful curly hair. And that just kind of opened her mind up to, oh, I didn't think about that there were others. And then it started to foster that I like my hair. And so I think that's a really powerful thing that we can all kind of think about. Where did it, or what was the origin of it? And then kind of see if you can connect those dots.
Yeah, so for me, it was getting teased at such a young age for being dark. I grew up in a predominantly white area, and this was back in the 70s and 80s. So it was a different time. And so because I wanted, I had this feeling that, or this mindset that, boys would like me if I was white. If nobody likes me because I'm brown, I would have more friends if I was white. So that's the origin for me. And once I figured out that that was not the case, everything started to change. So it's like you said, once we see that there's a different outlet, that that's not true, we take that sentence and now it's like my mom used to say, she goes, do you know how many people have to sit in the sun with tanning lotion to get brown? Like, do you know how lucky you are? You just wake up and you are brown. So she would find things to help me see a different side than to just constantly want something that I'm not. And then also, one of the things my mom would foster in me is to be happy with the way that God made me. Just to really have gratitude about, that I can use my arms and my legs, that, that I'm not, you know, bedridden, that, I'm smart and I'm able to make decisions and like all these different things that we don't think about, that we can, blink our eyes without putting eye drops in our eyes every day. Like there's so many little things that my mom pointed out to me, which I'm at the time I was like, I didn't think about that. But now we don't think about that. We take so much for granted that we don't even realize how privileged we are to have our functioning. And you're a doctor, so I'm sure you see a lot of people with different ailments, right? That don't have every movement that we have and the opportunity for the life that a lot of us get to live. There's a lot of people with a lot of different ailments. So, I think it's important, like you said, is that we get to the origin of where that thought comes from and helping them realize that that's not really perfect. That, you know,
Absolutely,
it's
absolutely. And, when I think of, my dad, and this part is important for me, and I always share this piece because he was instrumental in what I do every day and what my goals are when it comes to really helping, health equity and all the other things that I'm passionate about. I grew up going to different places, volunteering at food banks, going to advocate or different webinar or not webinars, sorry, different rallies, just trying to advocate for change. And at that moment, I didn't really know what I was holding as far as a sign or what I was doing when I was filling bags. I knew somebody was in need. And that really set or created a blueprint for me for my life moving forward because although I didn't know what sign or necessarily see the family that I was helping, I knew I was doing something for someone that didn't have what I had and in respect to what I was giving forward. And so that has come full circle for me in my life to this day. And my dad, as you know, he was 99 years old and he was a triple war veteran, World War II, Korean, and Vietnam, and the things that he saw and faced, but still was really able to know that things are he had it better than somebody else even through everything that he faced. And so he put that forward for me, and that's what I try to carry forward for my girls and actually use it as a part of my life principles every day.
that is so beautiful. So, so beautiful. And, that's one of the things that my husband and I do with our children. I created a basket brigade here in our town for several years. And even though I'm not a part of Rotary now, they still continue to do that, and just it's that ripple effect. And it's, our kids, bringing my kids into this when they were so young and just being able to deliver full baskets to families that couldn't otherwise afford it, and my kids just getting that realization that they had, a little part in making this Thanksgiving special for another family, and the gratitude that they were able to have just by doing these volunteer experiences. And we do take our kids to different opportunities to volunteer, because I think that, like Dr. Bayo was saying, how it helped create the character that she is today because her dad gave her those opportunities. And yeah, I think it's important, us parents, when we're talking about um being able to teach our kids something that they can carry on in their life. So we're taking them away from perfection. We're taking them into doing the best that they can, being the best that they can. One of my friends say, you can have the best life and not be the best you, but when you are the best you can have the best life. And I think that is so important for us to be able to continue to teach this to our kids, you know, especially now when the world is changing and there's so much uncertainty going on. What is perfection? What are we as parents teaching our kids in this time and day of what perfection is versus what can it be if we're just doing our best? So another opportunity that for our listeners is to teach our kids about doing our best is getting involved with them and really helping them understand like what the standards are. One of the things that strategies I put in my, I have a video course called Crack the Code to Parenting. And what I say is when you are setting standards for your kids, it's they'll always feel like there's perfect when they come home, when you come home and you're like, oh, the counters aren't clean, you didn't sweep right, because now in their mind it wasn't perfect. So instead of that, help set the standard with your kids. The first time they're doing it, teach them, then say, look, I'm getting the counters. Notice how I'm moving everything back and I'm getting the crumbs outside of it. With the broom, look, I'm getting all the corners. I'm not just sweeping the main area. I'm getting everything underneath the cabinets. And so they have an idea of what the standard looks like. So they actually can have something to compare it to. So they're not feeling that they have been, they're not perfect. It's there's a fine line with setting a standard and helping your kids reach that standard versus saying that this is the only way to do it and this is what perfection is. It's really about teaching our kids, do the best you can and don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's one of the things that Dr. Bayo was saying when she was on, and hopefully she'll come back, is that, you know, getting the communication with your kids and how important that is. So she asks them when she asks them questions, she's always, tell me more. Tell me more. How can we, how can I support you even more? And I think that's really important with our kids in all facets of life, whether it's school, whether it's doing chores, whether it's, even the challenges that they go through with their friends. It's being able to have that curiosity with them, to be able to be open with your kids so they don't feel judged. My daughter came to me the other day and my husband and was talking about a subject. And she says, if I was like this, would you judge me? And my husband and I are like, no. And here's the beauty of it. The fact that she was willing to ask instead of just think that she can't talk to us about it because what if we do judge her? And another thing is asking your kids, what does judgment look like? Because if I tell you no, that doesn't mean I'm judging you. It's just I'm telling you no. It doesn't mean that you're right or you're wrong. One of the things that I think we should be doing for our kids is teaching them to accept no and not manipulate around it or not be upset about it. Maybe even ask better questions around it. When I was little, my mom would tell me no, and feel so disappointed, just like our kids do, right? They want something. I want to go to a friend's house. I want to eat this ice cream, and it's a no, and they get disappointed. It's explaining to them, though. It's giving them the reason. It's helping them understand what the no means instead of just no and cutting it off. Because I'm going to tell you, it helps build that communication. It helps take that communication to a much higher level. And so when they do come with real problems, they can talk to you. And again, it's realizing that all we can do is nurture what it looks like for them to be their best. Asking them questions of what would it look like if you were your best? Did you do your best? Instead of giving them this facade that there's a perfect way to do it. And like I said, I look back at my own childhood and I lived in a time where I wanted things to be perfect. And it was probably about 2008 when I realized that there was no such thing as perfection. And because my perfect was not the person who may be judging or wanting something different, their perfect was different from my perfect. And to this day, I will say sometimes I get caught up in that. It's like, did I do it right? Did I do it right? And really what we're asking is, did I do it perfect? Will I be chosen now? Will somebody accept me? Will I be the one on that team if I do it perfect or do it right? And honestly, you just got to let go of that. You have to really be in the mindset of it's not about perfect. It's really about doing our best and how we can do our best. So, I don't know if Dr. Bayo is going to come back on or not. So I'm just going to ramble on for a few more minutes. One of the things that the challenges I see with our kids is about disappointing our parents. And so if we can really support our kids again in understanding that we have to have standards, because if we don't have standards, it's like throwing a dart without a target. We're just going to be throwing empty darts. So it's creating goals, it's creating standards. But again, Dr. Bayo, thank you for joining us back. One of the things that I was saying is that it's, instead of giving our kids something to do and then scolding them they didn't do it right, to do it with them the first time. Set the standard by showing them what it looks like, like doing your chores or whatever. And so it's really about honing in on getting away from the perfection and getting there. Like you were saying, there is a difference of doing it right and doing it perfect. There are things that we do right, and there's some things that, like you said with your kids, like, it's okay to do it wrong because we're going to learn in it. So, just going forward is really helping our kids really, number one, either have goals that they can reach or have standards, and teach them about the standards instead of dictate about the standards.
That part is so important. And when you were mentioning, showing them how to do a specific chore in advance, and I think also thinking about the little pieces that they said, "Yes, I'm gonna help with that chore." And I know that sounds really kind of condescending and sounds strange. Why should I, like, thank them for doing the little, like, a chore, or doing it even if it's considered not the best? But I think when you do that, then it opens up the conversation that, okay, I she really means what she says, that it doesn't have to be at its best. She's just happy that I put effort behind it. And we often forget effort should be celebrated. And so whether it's a chore, whether it's something that is an actual subject, or an accomplishment with a sport, or something like that, effort matters. And I think that also helps your child feel like they can see a path of, this is important. It's not about the ultimate goal. It was, what did I put forward towards that goal?
Mhm. And I love that you say celebrate the effort. I think celebration is one of the biggest things that we can teach our kids. And I actually have it in my book, Teach Your Children That They're Enough. That's like the third thing about building, the third chapter of building your kids' self-worth, is teaching them to celebrate. Celebrate their wins, celebrate their losses, or what I say, learnings. If they win every time, what are they learning? However, if you give them opportunity to not win and you give them opportunity to learn, how are you setting them up? And one of the things I was mentioning, Dr. Bayo, was teaching our kids to really accept the word no. Not no as a punishment, but when you tell your child no, explain to them, no, you can't have ice cream right now, sweetheart. You're going to bed in 30 minutes and your blood sugar rises. And that is not a great thing to do when you're trying to get a good night's sleep. So they understand that no is not bad. No, one of my mentors, Les Brown, he says, let no be your vitamin to life, to create the optimal life. Don't take no as something to discourage you by. Take no as something to empower you by. And if we could teach our kids that now, because I was saying when I was little, I didn't like no's. I was very discouraged because it was a no, I'm your mom, that's why. That was it. Instead of, it's a no, not now. No, because of your health. No, because I love you. No, because I want you to be safe. And it gives also that opportunity to open up that communication, so it's open, safe, and trusting, and your kids don't feel judged, and that they can come to you and talk to you.
Providing an explanation is so important. And now, you don't always have the time to do that. Of course, as many of us, many people listening right now, sometimes we're just trying to save their life from, walking in front of a car and all those things. We don't have time to be like, I'm not going to explain my no. So it's important that I mention that part. But there are times where just an extra 5 to 10 seconds of giving an explanation, um, can really help your child build a catalog of reasonings, and those reasonings can be a building block for what they move forward in understanding certain situations, people, different things. And then they can go back and circle back to it and think, oh, that's right. That no was because of this. And then kind of put all of those pieces together. And when you have that, that becomes a sentence or a memory to help moving forward when you may face that same situation or something similar.
Yeah, I love that. I love that explanation. And you're right. There's times I'm going to tell you no, and I don't have time to explain it, but maybe I'll get back to that.
No, you may not eat that terrible thing like right there, like dirt or my kiddos, I don't know, had affinity for that. We're not edible. So so yes.
And here's what I think about that's beautiful about this topic that we brought today is that if we could teach our kids this now, we are setting them up to win in their life as an adult. Because I can personally say from my own life that part of my hindrance in my growth in my younger years was not feeling like I was getting it done perfectly, not knowing how to make it perfect. And again, it wasn't until I was in my, mid 30s that I realized that perfection doesn't even exist. It's an illusion that I had created, the meaning I was giving things. And my whole world changed and I catapulted in my growth once I let go of that. So as parents, if we can really give our kids that gift of knowing there is no perfection, there's just the best that we can do in that moment, then we are really giving them an opportunity to grow into an adult that's going to prosper in their life. And they're not going to have to learn it in their 30s. I think there's like a little delay again.
And information allows you feedback. That feedback shapes what you do moving forward. But you can't get the feedback if you're just or if you're trying to achieve perfection, because that means supposedly our own perception that it's perfect. And when it's perfect, there's no room for growth. There's no feedback. There's not any errors. And that is inhibits you, excuse me, to be able to foster new ideas, new things, and grow. And so I think that part is also important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Bayo, it has been so great having you here and such wisdom and knowledge. If you could leave our listeners with a couple of golden nuggets, what would you tell them?
I would say give yourself grace, give your children grace. And through that, you can create your own perception of what is important to you, your child, and how you want to move forward. And so grace, I would say, would be the biggest thing. Allow yourself grace.
I love that. And that is so important. And I just want to piggyback off that because it's something that you said in the beginning of our show. It's your kids are watching you. So give yourself grace and give them grace.
It is so important. We are ready to give our kiddos everything we've got. We have to give ourselves everything we have, because without it, you can't give your children what you want them to have if you haven't done it for yourself.
100%, 100%. Word from the wise, guys. Word from the wise. Thank you again, Dr. Bayo, for joining our show tonight. If you're finding value in the conversation here in our show, please join our Redefine Parenting group on Facebook for more tips and conversation. Thank you for joining the conversation tonight. Again, together we can give kids a childhood they won't have to heal from, One of the resources is my ebook. Again, go to my website, download it today, or the QR code is listed here on the screen. Thank you for joining in on the conversation. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.
Thank you for having me.